welcome to Broadway Happy Hour, where there is no greater blend of wine and theater. I am your host and your virtual bartender, Kate Rockwell, and we have such an exceptional show today. I am so excited for you all to join us. The Broadway Happy Hour is produced by iHeartRadio Broadway in partnership with Prodigal, producers of the Grammy Award-winning Broadway show Jagged Little Pill. iHeartRadio Broadway is the premier streaming Broadway radio station, playing show tunes 24/7. To find the Broadway Happy Hour podcast, go to iHeartRadioBroadway.com or search Broadway in the iHeartRadio app. Who don't know me, you may know the most recent job that I had on Broadway, playing the simple but sweet Karen Smith in Mean Girls, the musical, which I had the absolute pleasure of originating and playing for 2 years. My previous Broadway credits include Legally Blonde, where I made my Broadway debut in the year that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to think about how old that makes me. The revival of Hair, Rock of Ages, where I had the pleasure of playing Sherry for 15 months, and Bring It On, the musical, where I originated the role of Skylar. What many people don't know about me is that I am also a WSET certified wine nerd. Yes, that's right. I paid someone to let me call myself a wine nerd. I took some time off stage a few years back, and I worked in a wine shop here in New York City, down in the Lower East Side, called Discovery Wines. And while I was there, I earned my advanced certification from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, which is an international training school for wine and spirits. My time working in the wine industry taught me that wine and theater are very close cousins. There are so many parallels between these two industries that I love so much. And I am so excited to be here working with Broadway Wine Club and iHeart's Broadway Happy Hour to help support and connect the two worlds that I love. And that leads me to today's special event. I'm so honored to introduce this week's special guest. He is a multifaceted creator who has built a career that defies categorization. With boundless energy and creativity, his work in film, theater, television, and literature covers a variety of genres, continually threatening to create a few of his own. He received a special Tony Award at the 2018 Tony Awards after wrapping an extended Broadway run of Latin history for Morons, his latest one-man show, delivering his take on 500 years of Latin history, spanning the Aztec and Incan Empires to World War II. Recently, he earned both a Critics' Choice and Emmy Award nomination for his role as Raymond Santana Sr. in the Netflix series When They See Us, and an Emmy nomination for his role in the Paramount Network television series Waco alongside Taylor Kitsch and Michael Shannon. He will also appear in Barry Levinson's upcoming film Harry Haft, along with Ben Foster and Danny Devito. He has garnered numerous other accolades throughout his career, including an Emmy Award, a Drama Desk Award, as well as nominations for Tony Awards and Golden Globes. And me, personally, he was in one of the pivotal movies of my entire life, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything. Introducing John Leguizamo. John, this is my silent applause from Zoom all the way across.
Oh, thank you. I'm feeling the love.
Thank you so much for being here. We are so honored to have you. I'm a little bit in awe. You have been a pivotal comedian and actor in my life as I've grown up. So I'm so honored to be here speaking with you today.
I'm so honored. I mean, you've done so much in your young life already. It's very impressive how much you've accomplished. You know, we have a mutual friend.
We do. Tell me who.
Micah Frank, who was executive producer on Mean Girls.
I love it. That's wonderful. How do you and Micah know each other?
He was my assistant when I was in La Jolla, starting out on Ghetto Clown when he was like 19 or 18 years old. And
my God.
I hired him as my full-time assistant. He came here to New York, and then he dumped me for Dan Sullivan, like that.
I love working with Micah. He was so much fun to work with. We probably saw each other every single day for a solid 2 years.
He's brilliant. He's so bright, so fun. Yeah, that was his only goal in life, was to be a Broadway musical producer. He was a one-track mind to success.
Yeah, and then he got it, and then he left us to go do cooler stuff too. But
enough history of that, doesn't he?
enough about Micah. Tell me about you. Tell me where you are right now. Tell me what you've been up to in the last couple of crazy months, years.
Yeah, it's been so insane this past year. I mean, it was a crazy time, because in some ways it was very creative for me, in terms of I wasn't working for hire anymore. I was able to just follow my passions and write the plays that I wanted to, the screenplays, the books that I wanted to, because I didn't have any distractions. But at the same time, you know, it's wreaked havoc on a lot of people in the Broadway industry and performers and writers and musicians.
Absolutely.
I just did Waiting for Godot with Ethan Hawke and Wallace Shawn, the great Wallace Shawn, the brilliant Ethan Hawke, and Tariq of the Roots, who's fantastic. And we were allowed to film it. It's the first time it's ever been allowed to be filmed because of the pandemic. But it has to be destroyed like we're only allowed to show it for 3 weeks.
Is that true? They have to destroy the footage after that?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I actually did have the pleasure of seeing it. It's a spectacular production. It's so fascinating to watch a piece that was created, I mean, what is it now, 70 years ago?
1949, 50.
Yeah. To be taken and translated into such a specific period of time in the digital era. Talk to us a little bit about that, about what it was that drew you to the project, what drew you to the interpretation. It's so interesting.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I always found the play a little bit cute. You know, I never really loved it that much. Mm-hmm. I like darker or sillier stuff. But studying it with Ethan and I started studying it. It took 6 months for us to learn the lines and to get into it. But I started falling in love with the material. I started to see there was so much more depth, so much more rage, so much more meaning in it than people have dug out. People, I guess actors fall in love with the laughter and they start giving more and more laughs instead of trying to find the darker, deeper, because there's a lot of rage in there. It was written right after World War II. So he's talking about Europe after it's been bombed, the Vichy, the Nazis, joblessness, homelessness, all that was going on. It sort of paralleled our pandemic, you know, where we're jobless, we're all isolated, you know, all the depression that's hit so many groups. And it just felt like this talks to our time in such a weird way. And then we added, you know, the masks and some of the behavior, but the estate doesn't let you cut or add anything. You have to stick to exactly how you wrote it.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I mean, I'm thrilled that they gave the new group permission to create a new version.
Oh my God, I was so excited by that. I felt so blessed to be working with Ethan Hawke. First of all, he's such a blast to work with. What a great actor. And Wallace Shawn, you know, at the peak of his powers to take that lucky speech that's, I don't know, it's gibberish to me, but he makes it
probably to him too, to some degree.
Right? I was like, I think I understood it, but I don't think you're supposed to, but yeah.
I sat with my mouth on the floor watching that speech and he's silent all the way up or almost nearly silent all the way up until then. And then this speech comes out and you're like, I don't even know how to take in everything that's happening. But I felt that way about all of you because it was so, you know, this play is, the language of it is so specific. And there is a periodness to just the style of speech, which is so interesting to see that through the lens of this computer box that we've been living in for the last 15 months.
Right.
That is a dichotomy in and of itself. But I was also really struck by the loneliness of these particularly these two men. You know, it like reeks out of you two. And then, you know, you add on the element of being isolated. But I was fascinated to watch you navigate the moments of shared experience, meaning like sharing a prop or sharing seeing. It was so interesting to watch you sort of navigate those changes because obviously we know that the piece was written to be all in one room. And yet here we are projecting it as in this is the best kind of connection we can get, is this sort of
so well said. Yeah.
And it was
I think you hit it the nail on the head because we wanted to use this Zoom world. We wanted not to shy away from it, not to be afraid of it. And I felt like the Zoom added a filmic quality to the play because I'm a little tired of that landscape of the dead tree. I mean, how many plays of that with the bowler Charlie Chaplin thing? I mean, it was good to get rid of those tropes and still, you know, bring this language to life because it was hard. It was one of the hardest plays to memorize because some of the language is repetitive and some of the lines are said like 1,000. I mean, I say, who we waiting for like 40 times and he's saying Godot and I go, oh, and you're like, is this in the first scene of the first act or is this the last scene in the second act? And I'm like, you know, it's like, it took me months and months to like be able to like, okay, how is this asking who we waiting for different than it is in act two? And we finally found all the nuances. Scott Elliott of the new group directed it, and it was such a blast.
Did you two ever, I mean, you two or you four, technically five, ever have an opportunity to rehearse together, or were you entirely virtually rehearsing?
Virtual rehearsals.
That's so
I was
crazy.
in London.
So hard.
The editor was in Israel. The DP, the director of photography, was in California. Ethan and Wally were in New York, but we couldn't have just a few people on camera together. We had to like separate everyone. Because they added to the isolation, like you said, it added to the loneliness.
In some ways, I feel like that would actually benefit the production, because if you did actually rehearse together, there comes a union that would almost trickle into the performance that then sort of defies the whole point of the isolation and loneliness. So,
I think we would have got so cozy with each other, which always happens with actors. And
of course,
a great part of working in person is that you do create a bond and a camaraderie that
shared experience
that's you can't replicate anywhere. And that would have happened. But it was weird because I did feel really intimately close to Ethan and everybody through Zoom. So when the play ended, I was very depressed because like now I wasn't going to see my buds anymore on Zoom every day at 5 p.m.
At 5 p.m. because you have to rehearse at night because half of your team is in Europe. So excellent. This is, I mean, I'm assuming, because this is a new medium for all of us, I'm assuming this is your first time doing any sort of translation of a piece from a stage to, I guess the stage of the internet, the platform of the internet.
Right.
Did you connect? Go ahead.
Sorry. Because I've done my one-man shows for HBO and Netflix.
Yes.
So that, it's a little bit, but it's not the same. I mean, this is like I'm talking to you now through a camera. I mean, it's different than being in a live interview.
Well, that was what I wondered what this format sort of felt like in terms of being an actor. I mean, even in my very limited experience of this, the difference between being on stage and being filmed versus being in this room staring at a screen is dramatic. And you have you have lived in every format that you can live in as an actor, and also on the other side of that, as a producer, as a director, as a writer. But I wondered what this sort of translation felt like for you creatively. Did it ever feel stifling? Or did it feel as creative as other opportunities that you've had in your illustrious career?
I mean, it's freeing in a lot of ways, but then obviously, like the moments that are physical in the play, like the hugging each other, the intimacy of these two men needing each other so desperately, you don't get that. You get us wanting it, but never the holding or the satisfaction of being held, but everybody's been feeling that during the pandemic. It's like, as soon as you get your double vax, you're like, I'm hugging every motherfucker I see. I want to kiss people because I'm Latin, we love to hug close and kiss.
Absolutely. That's been everyone I see on the street now. I'm not necessarily, I don't know that I would have called myself a hugger in 2019. Now I think that's like the first word that I identify with is I just like arms out.
Oh my God, you want to hug people so badly. People don't even know. Just people who look nice and friendly.
No, just to say hello, because it's like, oh, you're out here and I'm out here and we made it. So I want to give you a hug.
It's amazing. Like all these tragedies, like always make New York, bring out the best in New York. Like September 11th, I remember the time right after that. It was like it felt like a small town.
Yeah,
like everybody was so gracious, so friendly, so wanting to help you with anything and everything. And you felt the same way. I
feel that way. My husband and I have been here the entire time. Have you been in the city the whole time? You live in the city.
I was at the beach, but then I was in Manhattan, downtown.
Yeah, I think that it really has made this city feel. I mean, like you just said, it's like the largest small town that you could ever live in because. It was just us for so long, and New Yorkers were so bonded together. I mean, you still see it in the sense that, I think this city, maybe more than other places in America, has really made an effort to like stay safe and do the right thing and try to protect the community, possibly because we got hit so hard in the beginning. But I also think that's what New York does so beautifully. People think New Yorkers are such hard. Can I say hard ass on this? Hard asses, and that we're so
if I said what I said,
defensive. But like, actually, we're such a bonded community. We're a community of people that understands that we work our butts off and that we all have things to do. But
we're neurotic and paranoid and all that. But at the same time, we wear our hearts and our sleeve. I mean, that's why New Yorkers don't get that close right away, because once we're close, we never let you go.
Absolutely. 1,000%. Talk to me a little bit about, you said you've been doing a lot of writing and a lot of working on your own projects in the time that we've not been working. So talk to us. I mean, whatever you feel like you are willing to share, wanting to share.
Well, it was interesting because, this whole COVID and Black Lives Matter was a really great, reckoning for America Hollywood system, the publish, everybody.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, we've learned that things weren't as inclusive as we thought they were. And, you know, I found out that we Latin people last year were like the least represented, the most underrepresented, excluded group in Hollywood and in publishing and in New York, at the New York Times, in so many places where, I mean, we're equal in population to whites in New York, 50% of LA, places where we're making the movies and publishing the books. And yet we're less than 1% of the stories in the New York Times are staffed or any other rag with the city's banner on it.
Wow.
And it feels like a cultural apartheid. So in so many reasons. And so, you know, I've been trying to get corporations and companies and directors to be much more inclusive. So I've been working really hard on that. And I think things are changing because people had a chance to look at their lives. So I've been talking to Scholastic, and they've been trying to get a lot of Latin writers to create children's books because Latin children are the least represented in children's picture books. So they're really trying to fix that. And so that made me feel great. Viacom made a deal with me, Selma Hayek, Eva Longoria, Angela Bassett, Courtney Vance to create Latin and Black content. So that made me incredibly happy. And I just feel like things are finally, I feel like for the first time in my entire career, that things are really, that there's a parity happening and people are really understanding what was going on.
I think I mean, I can speak for my own ignorance to say, like, I think there was a big global, let's say a national wake up to realizing like, wow, this is really bad. We have not done what we said we were going to do. We are not giving any sort of equal representation to anybody who doesn't look like me.
And women as well.
And women as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, but as much as I would love to see more women in particularly the sort of non-front facing Hollywood production.
Right.
I think
the
that
executives, the CEOs.
Definitely. Casting. Let's talk about casting and producing. Let's get, you know, but I think the premise is we all were like, oh, we're doing fine. And then all of a sudden we have nothing to do. We went, oh, we're not. We're really bombing. Yeah. Actually, we're as bad as anything else. And as a culture, as a group of people collectively who believe themselves to be sort of on the forefront of any sort of cultural awakening, I think it was a kick in the butt. Let's say kick in the butt for the podcast. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. It was a wake up call. It was
exactly
a call to action for all of us to look at ourselves and what we're doing and how we're being inclusive or not, you know, and I think it was wake up call too, in terms of being a man and not understanding that we weren't including women as much. You know, I did a movie about a year and a half ago, and it was like, we started looking at the script going, wait a minute, this is about 5 guys, but where are the women? I mean, we started to realize, oh, whoa, we need to change the script. I mean, this is ridiculous. This was okay maybe 20 years ago. I mean, it was never okay, but at least we convinced ourselves it was.
Sure,
so we changed a lot of the roles to women, and it made the movie so much better.
Well, I find that I hope that I hope that the important people are finding that the more diverse the narrative becomes with the more sort of different perspectives that you bring, the more interesting the story is 100% of the time. Like it's never not more interesting. It might be more complicated, but it's not more, it's always more interesting to do that. And I think that ultimately, as creators of art and as people who profit from the creation of art, because business too, whatever.
Yeah.
That is important. Like the complexity of story, we've already heard. I love Legally Blonde. I'm not throwing Legally Blonde under the bus, but like we've already heard Legally Blonde. Like, what if we tell a different story? What if we tell, you know, a more
Legally Black or something, or Legally Latin?
I mean, literally anything else. Like we've got this story. We need to hear another one, or at least something that has a little bit more nuance to it. It doesn't have to be only. You know, we can.
Right. I mean, I think there's room for it all. I mean,
I agree.
There is room for it all. I mean, Shakespeare started out, you know, back in the day, only men could play women's roles.
Yeah. And
how incredible it was when they finally started to add real women to the cast. All of a sudden, these stories became real and they had impact, and all of a sudden the performances got deeper, and then we could all relate. I don't know. I feel the same way, like adding Latin people to stories, because we didn't just get here. We've been here for 500 years. We're the oldest ethnic group in America, besides, after Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And we were here before because we were empires, Aztecs, Mayans, Incas. So, our story predates, the conquest and the pilgrims coming. And then we're not in, in Band of Brothers. We're not in World War II movies. We're not in Mad Men. As we didn't exist in New York City at that era. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah. Thank you for that spectacular transition, because I wanted to talk to you about Latin history for morons. I actually got to see I think the first production you ever put up at La Jolla. I was there doing another show. I was working on Hollywood, which was, I think, not the next show when it was there, but it was like the second main stage show that they were doing there. And you invited us, allowed us to come. And so I got to see the show there, which was so fun. I've never seen anything like what you did in that show. That was incredible. But I was so excited to see something in its almost its infancy, really.
Oh, yeah. Really early on. And you guys helped out so much. I got to hand it to La Jolla, that lab that they created.
Yeah.
And having the talk back, and you guys talking back. That's a collective creation. That's how I create my work. It's like I need that feedback because I'm all alone by myself, kind of, I'm writing it, I'm performing it. And I need that back and forth with artists like yourselves.
I'm so interested to hear, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about what the actual whole process of creating a piece that I call it large, because that expansive, writing it, directing it, starring in it yourself. It's 90 minutes, I think, like just about 90 minutes.
Yeah, a little bit over, with audience participation.
It was so much to take on. And it changed so much from La Jolla. Yeah. It was so different by the time that it got to Broadway, and now it's on Netflix and on HBO as well, right? I believe.
Netflix,
yeah, on Netflix. Okay. So you can stream it now. It's had such an incredible journey, and I was wondering if you would expound a little bit on what goes into creating a piece that is entirely on your own shoulders, because that's a very different thing than being an actor or being a director in a large group company. I have my own show. It's not like yours, and it is exhausting. And so
that it always is. There's no cure for that. It's always going to be incredibly exhausting.
What inspired you to create the piece? I'm assuming you were inspired because you were very passionate about your culture, and I'm so interested in how that particular focus became the focus of the piece.
Well, it's so interesting because my son was being bullied in middle school, mm-hmm. and severely bullied. It was really hostile and aggressive, and it became racial. And I wanted to be an involved parent. I didn't want to be the way my father was. Like, I want you to go. You don't come home until you beat the hell out of that punk. And I didn't want to be that. I wanted to give my son words to defend himself with words and information and facts and data, and especially about being a Latin person. So in helping my son, what ended up happening was that I was the one that started feeling empowered and learned that being Latin is a superpower. That's what I got out of it. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to impart what I'm feeling to 68 million people across the country. And it was very powerful for me. There's all the things that I learned, we're the only ethnic group that's fought in every single war America's ever had. And I'm talking about, 1 in 8 patriots that fought in the American Revolution were Latin. Juan de Miralles got $2 million from Cuba, Mexico, and Spain to give to George Washington. Cuban women in Virginia sold their jewelry, their hoop earrings, and gold teeth to feed the patriots. We were part of it. And in the Civil War, many of us Latin people were officers who were honored by Abraham Lincoln, who handed them awards, medals of honor. So all this information and our oppression as well. It's from 1800 to 1930, 6,000 of us were lynched, burned alive, and shot because they wanted our ranches and our land and our political clout. In 1919, the Bath riots happened, where we Latin people were the gold standard of immigrants because we came here, did all the services and then would go back. But they started, separating the men from the women and making them get naked and then spraying them with Zyklon gas and cyanide and gasoline. And then the Nazis borrowed from that sort of American way of dealing with immigrants to Nazi Germany. Wow. So all the oppression and all the greatness that we contributed, I was like, how do I get this in a play?
Yeah.
How do I not, because even though there's this powerful information, I learned that people don't want it all. They were like, they need entertainment, they need, they need all that stuff. So it was like a recipe. I had to get that recipe just right. How much information for how much jokes and storytelling, and how do I make myself happy and not lose them? So it was always a dance and a formula, always changing the formula a little bit.
How many phases did it go through before you had what I'm going to call, which is probably not a terrible phrase to use, a finished product?
Yeah, right. Because it's never really finished till it,
No.
Until they pull me off the stage. That's the last time I stopped fixing it. But wow, I mean, it was almost 4 years of performing it from Berkeley Rep, La Jolla Playhouse, Cave and Creek here in Long Island. I was doing it everywhere, all across the country, and it was growing and getting better and better. And then the Great Lab at La Jolla, Berkeley Rep was always a home for me as well, and then finally at the Public, with the help of Oscar Eustace, the head of the Public Theater, is one of the greatest artistic directors I've ever met, one of the greatest storytellers, one of the great protectors of artists. And he came. I never had an artistic director who came to La Jolla to see performances, who came to Berkeley to see me perform, who came to San Diego to see me do it in a club in Bomb. It was great. It was incredible. And then there he was, still for me at the Public Theater.
Yeah, he's an incredible, he's probably one of the biggest champions of the arts of our generation.
Yes.
Particularly the arts on stage.
Here's to Oscar.
Absolutely. I will cheers to that. John, do you have a preferred format for work? Like, do you prefer theater? Do you prefer on camera? Do you have like a preference? I know they're very different, but I wonder what makes you the most comfortable or the most satisfied.
Well, it's tricky, man. It's tricky because film, I feel like in film, there's such a freedom in terms of, improvising and creating behavior and getting lost and feeling safe, like letting yourself go totally bonkers and knowing that you're going to yell cut and you can come back to yourself. Yeah. But on stage, if you go that crazy, you don't know, there's nobody there to stop you. There's nobody there to pull you back and get you going. So it's kind of hard to totally go insane and come back to yourself. But on stage, with the audience laughing or applauding or hearing them crying silently, it just feeds you. And then all of a sudden you're adding stuff and doing things you never thought you could. You're like a superhero. You can all of a sudden break out in a dance you never thought, or a rant that you never thought you didn't write. They didn't plan to say, but the audience got the spirit, like I was a Pentecostal or something.
Yeah, no, they're so different. I think it's hard to deny anyone who's ever had the opportunity to perform on stage in front of a live audience has a very hard time saying that isn't like a chemical high. That reaction, that instant connection with another group of people that is experiencing something at the same time that you're experiencing it. Like, to me, there's nothing that tops that. I've had some, not nearly with the same experience that you've had, but I love being on camera. I love the creativity that the naturalism of it and the
right, exactly,
expansiveness of that. But I have to say I couldn't leave the theater for long because it's just that feeling of connecting to people and having them laugh at your jokes right in the moment when you want them to. It's like, it's just
so powerful. And the quiet moments too, like a shared quiet moment where we're all thinking together in a Zen moment is so beautiful and powerful. And then, it's the Olympics of acting. I mean, you can't, if you ain't studying, you ain't done your homework, you can't perform on the stage. You're not going to move people. You're just not going to be able to make the play sing. You can't, unless you studied hard.
They're right there with you. That's the thing about audiences. They see right through you. If you don't buy it, they will not buy it for a half a second. Do you look forward?
Movies, you can fake them out. You can fake them out a little bit because movies allows. Sometimes a movie's okay with just seeing a face, a still face. You can imprint on them what your thoughts are, but on stage, you got to bring the goods. You got to have the goods because nobody's going to imprint on you.
Do you have a plan to come back to the stage again? Do you have interest in coming back to the stage again now that we're finally going to be allowed to reopen and restart our live theater in this country?
I know it's going to happen. I mean, it's coming. I just went to 2 Knicks games. The first game was before the playoffs, and it was only 10% capacity, so 2,500 people. The next first day of the second playoffs, it was 19,000 people.
Ooh,
and they were all, we had to test an hour before. You had to show your vaccinated card if you're going to be courtside.
Yeah.
You had to follow all these rules, which was okay by me because you felt safe.
Yeah.
I hugged Spike Lee. I saw John Turturro. Chloe de Savigny was there. John McEnroe and his brother. I mean, we were all there together, but we all felt safe because everybody had gone through the whole rigmarole, whatever. I can't. No more wine.
Well, how about this? We'll use that as the transition to talk a little bit about this wine, because I feel like I'm not doing you a service if I don't tell you what you're drinking.
Yeah, what am I drinking?
This is the new grape. This is a special release from a winery called F2 Wines. They're out in Olivos, California, which is in Santa Barbara. They created this Sauvignon Blanc. This is their 2020 release, so this is like a brand new release. I actually don't think
it's nice.
Released it themselves yet, so we're getting a first taste at it. All of his grapes are organic, so all organically farmed, all organic in the winery. Max Hotzel is the owner and winemaker. He has another winemaker that works with him, but he is also working in there with him. It's 14% alcohol, so
is that a lot?
It is a lot for wine. Yeah, wine usually lives in like anywhere from like 11 to 15, and this one's at 14, which for a white is like she packs a little punch, and you can kind of taste it. It's there in the back.
Yeah, but is that an American thing or is that a European thing?
It's an American thing. Yeah, it's because California, we have so much sun, and those grapes get so ripe, and the riper the grape, the more alcohol in it. But what's cool about this is that they are actually barrel aging their Sauv Blanc, which is unusual. They're neutral barrels, so it doesn't taste like oak. Like it doesn't smell like vanilla. It doesn't taste like an oaky Chardonnay.
Right. That oaky
kind of thing. It allows oxygen to sort of seep in through the wood and into the wine. And what that does is it softens it. It doesn't taste, Sauvignon Blanc can taste really grassy, like really like there's a lot of a lot of interesting wine words for Sauvignon Blanc. I'm going to stick with grassy because cat pee is really offensive. But that is a word we use to describe Sauvignon Blanc.
But understood, because I've drank some cat pee.
That's what sometimes it can taste like that. This is not that.
I'm okay with cat pee after my fourth glass. I want that cheap cat pee because I want to spend that money because my taste buds don't work anymore.
I mean, a couple of glasses of this and you can be very happy with some cat pee because this will really numb those taste buds a bit with that 14% alcohol. But this is delicious. This is like fruity. It tastes like bright Meyer lemons and like almost like pineapple in this. Like it's super fruity and delicious. And there's like a really pretty.
That's crazy when you speak and you tell me the adjectives, I start feeling them.
That's right. It's that impressionable like
pineapple. I was like, yeah,
it is though. It's got that really beautiful
Meyer lemon. Yeah,
like a luxurious I was like, it's like tropical wine. Like if the tropics had Sauvignon Blanc, this is like what I would describe that as. Because it's there. She's it's strong and it's fruity and it's bright and floral. It's got like almost like a papaya-y note to it, but there's still like some grass in there, some green. It's a beautiful wine. I'm very, very impressed. And they're doing a good job. So I'm gonna cheers you one last time.
Absolutely. That was so delicious.
Cheers.
Thank you for getting me drinking so early in the day.
I love day drinking. Talking about. I would never
a little plastic cup to walk away.
Yeah, we'll get you a roadie, just like a
roadie
full of a high-end California Sauv Blanc. John, I want to do one last little round with you, if you don't mind. We're gonna do like a speed question round because these always go so well. I'm gonna start you off easy, so we're just gonna do you prefer wine or beer?
Oh damn, that's
the easy one.
That's the easy one. I love beer. But I love wine. Oh man, that's a hard one. I love me some beer too, though. No, I say wine. Wine definitely. Okay. A good glass of wine, nobody can beat.
Okay, paper or plastic?
Oh, paper, anything.
Favorite Broadway show of all time?
Oh snap! Oh man, I got to say Whoopi Goldberg's piece because that's how I started doing one-man shows was because of Whoopi.
I love that. What did you want to do with your life when you were 12?
Oh, I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Me too.
I think every kid wants to be a veterinarian or a spy. It was either
play one on TV. What is the favorite thing you have ever been gifted?
That I've ever been gifted.
The best gift. Your favorite gift you've ever been gifted.
Well, I got a beautiful copy, an original copy of Death of a Salesman, like one of the first editions, signed and everything by Arthur Miller. Yeah, so that was pretty beautiful. When by Gregory Mosher when I was doing a Freak in 1998.
Wow, that's a spectacular gift. That's like a very real answer. I was like, maybe you're gonna say like my kids.
I should have said my kids if I was a good parent.
I think first edition Death of a Salesman is up there with them. What is something you will not be doing in 10 years?
Dancing. That's for damn sure. I mean, I can barely dance anymore, but I'm gonna still keep dancing anyway. It just hurts a lot more.
Dancing long dances.
Yeah.
We'll do the short dances. What are 3 words that best describe living in New York City?
Oh wow, 3 words. Cultural mecca. I know it's 2 words, but
Yeah, okay.
hyphenated. It's cultural mecca. Dopest people in the world. Melting pot.
I love it. Oh,
sorry about that.
Oh, oops. There you go.
There you go.
I was like, I can still hear you. You're not gone. 2 more. 1, if you could swap careers with anyone in history, would you, and who would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Maybe Lenny Bruce. I would swap careers with him.
Great answer.
Yeah, I just found that he was doing such innovative stuff at a time when it really was kind of dangerous towards the performer for saying things and doing things. Like now we don't really have that kind of danger. If we say something, you may be banned, but you're not or canceled, but you're not going to, it's not going to destroy your whole life.
Yeah, not going to get thrown in jail for it.
Right.
Last question. What is your best? I put it in quotes because I'll let you decide what best means. What is your best alcohol-fueled tale?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I was young and tequila makes a guy do some crazy things. I was shooting a movie with Kevin Costner. I'm not name dropping. Yes, I am. And, I just had too much tequila, and I once I was young and I had tequila, I started taking off my clothes. I was dancing on top of a table, rapping. They had to drag me out of the bar. And I'm glad they did, because pull the plug.
That sounds like the exact right way we should end this interview.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being so open and candid. And this has been such a pleasure for me.
Oh, I've been fun, a lot of fun for me too. Thank you.
I hope with the wine
was
it's
delicious.
good for you.
Cheers to you.
Cheers to you. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for listening to the Broadway Happy Hour, where there's no greater blend of wine and theater. I am your host, Kate Rockwell. It has been a pleasure, and we will see you next time on the Broadway Happy Hour. Now, so exciting. We've not been able to do this at Broadway Happy Hour, so I'm so pumped we're doing this. I would like to hand the proverbial microphone off to Arvin Ethan David, who is the founder of Broadway Wine Club. He is the principal at Prodigal, the lead producer of Broadway's Jagged Little Pill, and he is standing by with Derek McLane, who is the production designer of the new group's production of Waiting for Godot.
And here I am. Kate, thank you. And good Lord, thank you for such a wonderful interview with John. I felt I learnt, I was moved, and I did laugh a lot. I'm also drinking, so my judgment may be impaired. Let's bring on Derek, the wonderful Derek, who I want to see here. Hello, Derek McLane. How are you, sir?
Arvin, how are you?
I'm very well. I should have introduced you before you came on camera, but I am only an amateur interviewer, so I'll get wrong. But I was going to say that you've designed more Broadway shows than most of us have seen, except this particular audience has seen a lot of Broadway shows. So even though you've designed, 42 now? 41?
I think that might be right, yeah.
Which is a special number, 42. But
yeah, well, I hope you did. I feel sorry for anybody who saw all 42 of them.
Well, you've certainly designed more Academy Awards than most people have sat through. So you also have that. But gosh, we have to live up to quite an interview and quite a conversation that came before.
Yeah, that was a great conversation.
It really was. John is such a extraordinary powerhouse mind. He can move from Dancing Naked with Kevin Costner to a dissection of the racist history of America seamlessly, and that is a rare thing. I want to get out of the way for our audience the drinking bit so that they can do that easily. So I'm going to talk for like 2 minutes about the wine. But Derek, I will give you a a warning that I'm going to ask you two of the questions that Kate asked John, so you can think about them. I want you to think about your best alcohol, ideally your best alcohol in the theater story, or alcohol in
Best
theater.
alcohol in the theater story. Okay.
And I'm going to ask you, if you could swap careers with anyone in history, who would you swap careers with? And I think we can both, if we both think about our answers to those. So think about those as I just give everyone who's watching us permission to open your second bottle of wine, if you're tasting alongside with us. The wonderfully named, I wonder how we thought of this, Waiting for Pinot, which is a extraordinary Pinot Noir made by two wonderful winemakers, Sashi Morman and Raj Parr, two of the very rare winemakers of color working at the highest levels in America. Raj is Indian American, Sashi is Japanese American, and this wine is sometimes voted one of the best Pinots made in America, and I'm happy to back that claim up. So open your bottle and pour yourself a glass, and Derek, pour yourself a glass too, and let's see what we think of that. Cheers, everybody. Cheers, Derek.
Cheers.
Oh, that's better than a kick in the head. That's my.
It's lovely. It's really lovely.
Right. So now we're going to talk, and while we talk, everybody who's watching, if you want to ask questions of either of us or just broach conversation, please stick it in the comments. We can see the comments, and we'll pick up stuff and talk about it too. All right, Derek. Let's jump in. I've given you. I gave you thinking time. What's your best booze in the theater story?
Best booze in the theater story. Well, definitely drinking in a production meeting after a show. After a preview. I mean, every show has a completely different rhythm, and it's usually sort of a function of the director. Some directors like to have very short production meetings at the end of the night of tech or after a preview, and some directors like to have really lengthy ones. And it's during those lengthy ones that sometimes alcohol is consumed.
Because it's pretty late, right? At this point, it's starting at 11 o'clock at night. This production meeting.
It's really late, yeah. Actually, the longest ones I ever had was doing one of the television musicals at NBC, where we would have a full day of rehearsal, and then we'd have a production meeting with the producers and some people from the network, and it would basically be the director and the designers, and we would go through videotape that had been shot that day, tape of rehearsal, and review it and freeze frame and rewind and go back. And those net sessions often last 4 or 5 hours. So, it started out where they were bringing in sort of catered food for us during these meetings, because they started at I can't remember, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they go till, 1 or 2 in the morning. And but after about 3 days of this, I said, I don't think we can do these meetings anymore unless there's alcohol. It's not really reasonable to ask us to stay for 4 or 5 hours in this room in the evening without something to drink. And so, of course, what happens when you're doing that, you start to speak a little more freely, of course, about what's going on. But I remember one day, I apologize because this is not strictly speaking the theater. It was a television show, but it was of a Broadway musical. Broadway musical. And Paul Tazwell was the costume designer, and he and I were sitting next to each other at this conference table where we're having this meeting that was entering hour 3 or something like that. And we had, we were drinking our wine. Oh, we had drivers too, so we could get as schnockered as we wanted, and we were driven home at the end of the night. Anyway, there was a whole conversation about a sound effect that sounded like somebody complained that it sounded like a duck, and so I just started drawing pictures of ducks and sliding them across the table to Paul for him to look at, and we both tried to keep a straight face during that meeting.
That makes me think that sounds very schoolboy. And
I'm not saying Paul got drunk, but I'm saying I might have gotten a little drunk during that meeting.
no, you're not accusing anyone else of being
That's
drunk
right.
on work, just yourself. But that image is so glorious to me because it's a bunch of grown people, being paid and producing this big work of art that millions will see, and then getting giggly and getting drunk and passing notes.
Totally. Yes, exactly. It was very schoolboy. Yes.
Well, one of the great privileges, I think, of doing what we do is it feels very, for those of us who are lucky to figure it out early, it feels like we've just kept doing the thing we did at school.
Yeah.
And I was reading about your moment of epiphany when you realized you wanted to be a designer. And it was at college, right? It was a moment at college that came to you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it? What was the epiphany exactly?
Well, so I unlike a lot of people who do this, I did not do theater in high school, and I thought I was going to become an archaeologist. I worked on archaeological sites in high school, and so I sort of entered college sort of vaguely thinking that's what I was going to be. So I was an anthropology major, and I was taking my archaeology classes. But I had done a summer job, house construction work, building houses. And so somebody asked me to build a set, which is really not anything I'd ever considered before. And so I did that. And I met the set designer, and I watched what he drew up. And I never really heard of set design. I mean, never really considered set design as a thing before. But I thought it was so cool. And so I just started telling everybody I met that I wanted to design a set. So I was at Harvard as an undergraduate, and we did not have any theater. In those days, there was no theater program whatsoever. It was just purely an extracurricular activity, which was a blessing for me because it meant there was no gatekeeper to designing sets. So the fact that I had no skills whatsoever, like absolutely none, did not stop me from designing as many sets as I wanted while I was an undergraduate.
That's wonderful. That's actually, that feels very familiar. I was reading philosophy and law at Oxford, which also didn't and still doesn't have a theater program or a film program. Yeah. And whilst I was doing that, but my real reason for being there was to put on shows. And I had gone because I knew Oxford had a great tradition of comedy and theater, and that's what I went. So yes, similarly, no gatekeepers. I could just say, hey, I feel like directing a show, and I feel like writing a show, and they just let me do one every.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
No one stopped.
In a way, a lot of freedom.
And it's nice today. I often talk to, maybe you have the same. I have a group of friends from back in those days who all discovered theater, discovered writing or filmmaking or acting or whatever it was, and have just kept doing it for the interceding 25 years.
Yeah.
And then they're the group who discovered it, loved it, but got real jobs and are now, lawyers and bankers and doctors and do other things. And it's actually a very tricky conversation sometimes. I don't know whether you find this when we get together and half of them go, oh, you just never grew up. You just kept, and they're like, we got serious.
Yes, right.
And
yeah, I have that conversation all the time. And I mean, I'm fascinated by people's jobs, whatever they are. I love to hear people talk about their work and why they love it or why they hate it or what the biggest problem facing them at this moment is. And sometimes some of those classmates sort of were apologetic that they felt like they didn't follow necessarily their passion and feel a little guilty about that. And I always think that's a shame. Like this, so many people love being lawyers or bankers or financiers or entrepreneurs, and so I always discourage them from apologizing. I'm always curious to hear I assume that everybody's passionate in some way about what they do.
I agree people shouldn't apologize, but I think you're being kind when you say you assume everybody is passionate, because some people aren't.
Yeah,
some people, or the thing they may be passionate about may be completely distinct from their work. They may be passionate.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Yeah, yeah.
And I think that is a big divide for those of us who get to be nearer the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That is the big divide. Those who live to work and those who work to live. That is the privilege we have, which leads us into the second quick round question that Kate gave. Of
Yeah.
everyone in history, if you didn't have your job, which you clearly love and clearly are world class at, but if you could choose any other profession, any other individual whose job you wanted through history, whose would you have?
You know, I probably, you know, I think if I had been better at math and therefore capable of taking chemistry and things like that, I would have become a biologist. I basically in college took all my biology classes pass fail because I was really pretty poor at math, and I knew I could never become a biology major. But there were a lot of biologists there studying. You know, it really evolved into neurobiology. They don't even have it. You know, at Harvard they don't even have a biology department anymore. It's now divided into, because that's considered too broad. But a lot of that, the sort of behavioral biology was a really interesting thing, which was very controversial when I was in college.
Right.
And so there were a couple of professors there who, you know, I thought that what they did was super interesting. Gould and Wilson, who was terribly controversial then, but so my alternate reality would have been to have done
You'd be
that.
Stephen Jay Gould. You'd be Stephen Jay Gould. You'd swap with him. I wonder how.
I took his classes pass fail. I took Wilson's classes pass fail. A couple others, and they were great. They were so stimulating.
I'm a big
And people
fan.
argued it was, you know, it was an exciting moment in biology.
Yes. I've read a lot of Gould's books, in particular, some of Wilson's. Yeah. I can see that. That's such a specific answer. That's wonderful. I really like it. I wonder how either of them would do at set design. How either of them.
Probably much better than I would do as a biologist.
I was trying to think what my answer would be if I could choose anyone in history. And of course, in my case, I have to also think I'd have to choose anyone. If I go too back in history, I also have to imagine not just alternates in my abilities, I have to imagine alternates in the state of the world.
Yeah.
That I would be allowed to do those things in whatever culture I was in. So I think my answer would be I would want Oscar Wilde's career.
Yeah.
I would make different choices around 1930, around 1892. I'd make slightly different choices about whether to stay in London or go to France.
Yeah, right. That's a great answer. That's a much loftier answer than mine.
Oh no, I think a dinner party with Gould, Wilson, and Wilde, that would be a good dinner party.
Yeah, let's organize it. Well, that's a play right there.
Let's play right there.
Let's find a writer and get it.
They would have things to say to each other. I think they would.
Absolutely.
Someone's asked in the chat, Vic Carl, who we both know, has asked in the chat, what is your favorite design that you've ever done for theater?
You know, I change my mind about that all the time. Often what I'm working on at the moment is sort of my favorite thing because I get so into it. So, you know, and I'm just so interested in the challenges of whatever it is I'm doing that, you know, at the moment, it's like the things that nobody's even seen yet that I'm working on. But definitely Moulin Rouge was a favorite, just because it, you know, it had a kind of scope that, you know, is unusual. You don't usually get to operate on that scale.
You had a lot of toys in that one.
A lot of toys, but also like the world that Baz Luhrmann and Catherine Martin created with that film, which is what we were sort of, you know, we didn't do the film, we did something that's a little different, but it's, you know, it's obviously based on that. And that world that they created in terms of the characters, which John Leguizamo was actually, you know, one of those, and also visually was so rich. There was so much there. In so many different ways it was a really exciting sort of world to design in and to try to reimagine a little bit and reinvent and figure out how to make work on stage. So that was a super exciting thing, and I'm still sort of in it because we're working on I'm going to go to Australia in a couple of weeks to mount the production in Australia, and then we do London this in the fall, and so there's various other iterations of it that they're similar, but they're all different. They all have their own.
Because you get to make the theater a character in it, right? Because
the theater, and yes, the theater is definitely a character. So that's a thing in London. The theater's smaller, and it's sort of figuring out how to scale it appropriately for London, and then in Australia it's sort of a tour. It's not a tour like a U.S. tour where it moves every week, but it does have to play 4 or 5 different cities. So it has to be, so that design has to be more mobile than it is on Broadway by a long shot. So. It's they're all interesting challenges. So that was a favorite. I Am My Own Wife was a favorite because I guess when I designed I Am My Own Wife, I felt like I invented something new for that, and I felt like it worked. I felt like people responded to it, and it actually, to me, it felt original at the time that I did it. And the lovely thing about that was I did it at a little theater in Chicago, which is really small at the time. It was the About Face Theater in Chicago, which didn't have a home then. So we used the theater at the Museum of Modern Art in Chicago, and it had like a 3-week run or something like that. We had no money, but I did a version of that design at this little theater, and then I did an interview with Hetty Weiss from the Chicago Sun-Times. It was about something totally different. It was about a week after the show opened in Chicago, and Hetty said, "This show is going to move to Broadway and win the Tony Award for Best Play." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And she said, "Just wait, you'll see." And she was right. She was totally right about it.
It's nice when someone sees what you've done before you see it yourself.
Yeah.
What you said you thought you invented something. Forgive me, I haven't seen the show. I've seen some of the designs, but how would you distill what you did new?
Well, it's a story that was a sort of very complicated story where one actor plays about 35 characters. It spans a big swath of history from communist Germany, East Germany, to basically to the present. And she's also a furniture collector, and she operates this character operated a sex club in her basement. So she had an antique store upstairs and a sex club in the basement, and so she was a fascinating character, and but also it was a very complex play. And basically what I designed was this kind of system, basically a wall of shelves that had hundreds of objects on it, and there were so many objects on it you couldn't really see any of them at first glance. It was just a texture back there. But what we were able to do was, working with the lighting designer David Lander, we very carefully picked out various items in there with lights so that they helped to tell the story, and they helped to make the various locations of the story. Or sometimes they were the pieces of furniture in her shop that she was describing. It operated in a bunch of different ways.
Right.
But anyway, it was it was a thing that seemed very, very simple, but also did a huge amount. And I guess that was what I was proud of mostly. No,
that feels like that mixture of function and simplicity. I sometimes think is the designer's pinnacle, and when you hit it, you go, oh. Can I show you something very stupid that I helped invent?
Yes, please.
It's on the wall behind me. It's a scissor sword. And
really? What is that?
So it is a full-size sword.
Oh yeah.
That is a pair of scissors. And
that's great.
It was a TV show that I was making called Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and we were doing a season that was fantasy, that was sort of high fantasy. We had to create this fantasy world, and my partner on the show, very brilliant writer Max Landis, said we have to have a weapon that has never been seen before in the history of anything. And it was his idea. He came up with scissors. Have we ever seen it? And we spent days searching the internet and calling people, and no one had ever made a scissor sword. So now
that's great. Beautiful. It's a beautiful object.
It's actually, we sold most of them for charity, but most of them are made of wood. This one is fully functional and will kill you.
Yeah.
And so I hang it behind me.
And cut a giant piece of paper.
Yes. So mine's not as elevated as yours, but I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it anyway. Somebody has asked, Madison Morrow has asked, do you have a favorite type of wine? Asides, very kindly, asides from tonight's lovely selections.
Yeah, well, this is delicious. I will say, I generally don't drink that much California wine because I find it too. I don't like the sort of bigness of the fruit. I only drink red wine. I don't really drink white wine. But my favorite wines are Barolos, sort of classic old school Barolos. I like Nebbiolo. I like Barbaresco a lot. And then if I want something that's got a little more heft to it, I like a lot of Côte d'Aron's and also Pauillac. So I guess things that are maybe a little bit earthier.
Yeah.
Things that have wines that have maybe a little leather, a little barnyard to them. Sometimes some of the Côte d'Aron's have a nice barnyard.
Yeah, well, Côte d'Aron's are basically wood and dust and mud.
Yeah.
And some grapes mixed in as well. No,
but this is lovely, and this is not, this to me, to my unsophisticated palate, tastes very lean for a California wine, which I
well, no,
appreciate.
you're completely correct. You're just deprived of a piece of information. It's not Californian. It's from Oregon.
Sorry, it's from Oregon.
So it's a much cooler climate, and also much more. It's a very Burgundian style. It's a little bit of both. I think it has. I think they've taken the sort of Burgundian influences, but then it has a tanninness and a kind of, there's tobacco and some earth in it. I would say it's really why you like it. I think for a Pinot, it has a lot more earth and a lot more tannin than a lot of American Pinots certainly would have. It's also still very young. It's only 3 years old.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be extraordinary in a decade. I've actually, my daughter was born in 2018, and this is the 2018. So we're laying down 4 cases for her to have on her.
Oh, that's fantastic! Yeah, I think it will age really nicely. It's got enough acid in it, so it should really be terrific in a couple of years.
I agree. Although I'm with you on the Barolos. When we get together in the real world, let's get a bottle of Barolo together.
Sounds good to me.
So we're nearing the end of our time, but I realize we haven't talked much specifically about Waiting for Godot or the new group. And you not only designed that play, but you're also chairman of the board of the new group. Do you want to talk a little bit, as we come out of this interregnum, as we emerge into a post-vaccinated world and theaters open up, I think we all understand the challenges that we have, but what are the opportunities for theater groups like the new group? What are the things that people have learned in this terrible time that maybe might serve theater well in the time to come?
Well, so the new group, did do some work like Waiting for Godot, and is working on some other digital things that were developed during the pandemic. Lots of other theater companies have also been doing that as well, and so that has definitely been something that has I think caused the company to grow. Has caused I think it will probably inform the work going forward in ways that we're not even aware of yet. I think that the new group, everybody, the new group became, underwent a lot of the same awakening that so much of America did about race during this last year, and that's been really at the forefront of our conversations about sort of all of our planning about how shows are put together, how shows are staffed, what types of shows that we're doing, and our artistic director Scott Elliott has really embraced that. He's really excited by that, and so I think the work that we've got coming out of the pandemic is going to be really super exciting. this is production of this musical Black No More that's coming up, written by John Ridley, the Academy Award winning screenplay. He wrote 12 Years a Slave, and he wrote the book to this. It's an adaptation of a 1930s novel. And Tariq Trotter from The Roots has written the score. Scott Elliott is directing it, and Bill T. Jones is choreographing it. And it's a really exciting piece. And so
and you're designing that, yes?
And I'm designing it, yeah. And it's a very funny, provocative musical about race that I think is going to be really interesting and really interesting for this moment.
I'm so excited to see it. Excited to see it. I think one of the interesting things about this reckoning and about how people are responding to it is, and I think some groups are getting this exactly right, is that you can respond to it with the work you make, and that's important. But the second question is, how can we respond to it by the organizations we are, the organizations we build?
Yeah.
And I'm very aware. I'm a lead producer of a Broadway show. In the season that Jagged opened, they were 2, maybe 3 lead producers of color, across, and 2 of them were me and my business partner. So, and that is not a great ratio. But even in that, we can't take it for granted, because I think we were in danger of going, oh, look, our cast is really diverse and our producing team is really diverse, so we're fine. But no one's fine, because you have to all do the work all the time. And whether it's discovering, in our case, that middle management could be more diverse and be better, be more representative, or whatever it is, every organization needs to do that renewal. And one of my fears,
and as designers do as well. I mean, designers have had a terrible track record in that regard.
No, you're right. They're whole verticals. John mentioned casting directors. Kate, I try to hire a casting director of color. I know one. I know everyone who works. There's 1 or 2. It's so interesting how we've been casually blind to that for so long.
Yeah.
And I speak as a person of color. Like, I'm used to being the only person of color in every room I'm in, the only immigrant in any room I'm in. But yet, now it's like, okay, so let's not just comment on it. Let's not just call it out. Let's fix it. And I think the challenge as we come back is we'll be so busy just trying to come back, is how do we do the extra work at the same time? And I think having leaders like you and having folks who are thinking about it all the time. And it's also, isn't it? It's a design problem, like everything. How do you build an organization that can?
It's a structural problem. It's absolutely a structural problem, and it's not easy to fix, but that doesn't excuse not fixing it.
Well, that sounds like a designer's creed. Derek, it's been a great pleasure. We are at 1:15, wherever you're watching us from, and thank you everybody for coming. And Derek, thank you for drinking wine with us. And
thank you for having me. It was great talking with you.
And you. Cheers and take care.
I look forward to having a glass of or a bottle of Barolo with you in person someday.
As do I. I now realize I have no idea what I'm meant to do, how I'm meant to end this.
That is our show today. Thank you so much for listening to this exclusive episode of Broadway Happy Hour, where there is no greater blend of wine and theater. I am your host, Kate Rockwell. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we will see you next time on Broadway Happy Hour.